Hi, Tony Selzo here. Welcome to the Zipline. Today we've got a really special guest on the Zipline. For a long time, I've followed Jay Love and what he's been doing in this marketplace, and really has been a pioneer for technology, the technology movement really in Indianapolis, this whole tech movement that's really taken over and doing some awesome things. For a long time, Jay's been involved in really the nonprofit sector and using technology to facilitate the missions of these organizations. Jay's got a new venture here called Bloomerang, and it's actually doing some awesome things to help nonprofits not only manage their data but also drive their funding efforts to extend their missions. Jay, talk to us a little bit about how you got to where you are now, and give us a little bit of the span of your career, just because I know our following is really going to want to know how you got to here where you're at today.
Oh, well, thank you, Tony. Yeah, back in the early 80s, I had been in the computer industry for about 10 years, and I know I'm going to date myself a little bit, and I was introduced to the nonprofit industry by coming on board as vice president of a software firm that was based up in Castleton,
right,
by the name of Master Software,
right,
and eventually became the senior vice president and then the CEO of that organization.
Mm-hmm.
That was sold to a publicly held company in South Carolina. And not long after that, I came back and created another company called eTapestry,
mm-hmm.
and that was in the late 1990s, right, in 1999. So right as the dot-com era was really sprouting and going big time,
right.
We were flourishing with that. Also during that time, got very involved locally as I was a year or two after that, I was chairman of TechPoint
mm-hmm.
here in town, and
mm-hmm.
helped merge a couple of the tech-oriented organizations together, and also to create the TechPoint Foundation. So that was a lot of fun working with the Central Indiana Community Foundation. But ironically, that software firm I got involved with in the early 80s provided database and accounting applications to the nonprofit world.
Wow.
And so I've sort of been with that ever since. It's now been 31 years
wow.
being involved with that sector. And after eTapestry was sold, I did a couple consulting gigs for some of the venture capital firms that had funded me prior. And after doing that, was approached by some folks in the industry saying they had some wonderful intellectual property they'd like to bring to the table and put into an application that would help the fundraisers do a much better job of following best practices. And that's how Bloomerang was born about a year and a half ago. And we are having a ball jumping back into the market again and bringing out an application that a lot of people are really enjoying and talking quite a bit about.
Right. And one of the statistics that you and I talked about when we were doing prep for this call and I'm going to pick on the nonprofit sector for a little bit, it's just how bad they've been in maintaining and retaining their donorship, the relationship they have with their donorship. And that's really what your tool is all about. Your whole platform is about is understanding the data that measures the relationship with them and then proactively improving that. Am I oversimplifying?
No, you're right on track. One of the core tenets of what we're working with is the retaining of donors, or what we refer to as donor retention. Mm-hmm. And many of us in the commercial sector would think about it as customer retention. Mm-hmm. And I know on all of my tech companies, our customer retention was somewhere between 94 and 96, 97%. And mm-hmm. we really focused quite intently on that because we knew what the 10-year and 20-year value of that customer was going to be. Mm-hmm. In the nonprofit sector, a donor staying with an organization is not nearly as high. In fact, it has gone over the last 7 years from about 50% donor retention down to last year, it hit the lowest point, 39%. So more than 6 out of 10 donors did not return back and support that particular nonprofit in the following year.
Right. And you know what? And being in the lead gen business like we are, knowing the cost of an acquisition, if you're at 40%, if you're that low, you're dying a slow death, and you might not even know it. And so tools like what you guys are doing, the ability to bring a CRM platform like a Salesforce, an EMS platform like an ExactTarget or a Constant Contact, an accounting platform, and pulling that all together in an ecosystem that really measures the lifeblood of the organization. That's kind of what your tool does. Does that help paint the picture?
Very much so. Yeah, what we're doing, we're bringing together not only the reporting, but the record keeping, and then most importantly, the communication aspect, because building that relationship to move that retention level up, as you well know, is just like building a friendship. How do we get to know that person? How do we communicate so that they feel like they're a part of it? And that's so important in the nonprofit world, because the younger generations, people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, maybe even the 50s now, they want to make an impact, and they want to know what impact they're making. So it's not just saying that I'm going to make a donation once a year. It's more importantly is, what does my donation fund, and what change am I making come to life by that donation? So it's a whole new world for some of these nonprofits of saying, I want to communicate the impact. Right. And build that relationship in several different manners, because, think about it, Tony, you and I have now done communications via Skype, via email, via the telephone. Right. We didn't quite get a text in yet, but that's all happened in 24 hours.
Yeah. Well, I did text you yesterday just to let you know I was running behind, but so the and I think just picking on that and saying and getting to understand that the nonprofit world, what not only do you have this mission dilution, if you will, but you have a great deal of new organizations sprouting up, competing for the same dollars, really diversifying where the dollars can go. And people want to stay connected to the mission. And the other thing that I think is important that you guys allow organizations to do is to allow, disciples creating disciples, so to speak. Using the people that are fans of the organization and extending their reach, and using the personal relationship they have to leverage to create more dollars for the organization. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, a lot of what we're doing is involving all members of the team, so that whether it's the designated fundraising person, or the person who answers the phone, or the person that's the executive director, or the chairman of the board, they can all have a part in building those relationships. But more importantly, since we're creating a cloud-based application that they can use on their phone or their tablet or their laptop, they can record that information, and we build a full 360-degree view of that prospect or donor, much like you would for somebody that was talking to a commercial business and trying to sell them something. I think you're referring to the cost of bringing a new client in the nonprofit world. To raise $1 from a brand new person can cost as much as $1.25 or $1.50, versus bringing in $1 from an existing relationship can be as low as 20 or 25 cents. Wow! So it's a vast difference there on making that come to life.
Yep. So managing the tribe, building the tribe, using your platform as a way to do that, making sure that relationship, you're really bringing high tech to high touch. I want to change gears a little bit, Jay. One of the things that our following really likes to know is that, is Indiana a viable market for funding? And you've bought and sold now twice. In fact, you probably bought and sold when some of these guys weren't even born or just in school or even in diapers, right? And so I think, the fact that you've done that successfully and this market, do you buy the fact that we can't get funded in Indiana?
No, not in any way, shape, or form. In fact, my first set of venture capital funding was $6.5 million that came in from Boston. And it was after the dot-com bust. So you've got to remember that people are investing in not the idea, not the business plan, but the team that you've got assembled. Right. And there are so many people here that have had successful track records that are wanting to do something else. I mean, look at myself. I mean, I was ready to think about retirement, and I thought, no, this is a lot more invigorating and fun to come back into a marketplace and do something again. And there are many, many others like me, but more importantly, so many members of my team have successful track records too. And I think that's what investors are looking for. Right. With Boomerang, we decided to not go with institutional funding this time, Tony. So we brought together about 14 or 15 angel investors. And in our case, we made a real point that we were trying to build something for the long term. And that's a little bit different here in that we were not trying to build something to flip or sell in a 5-year or 6 or 7 year period, but to pay long-term dividends. And part of the reason for doing that was I went back and I looked at the last 2 or 3 transactions I was involved with. And I was fortunate to stay on and actually run those businesses for a certain time period. And I could see the returns and cash flow that they were creating. And in some of those situations, we would have been better off to hold on to the business and take that cash flow for 3 years than we would have been selling it for a 3 or 4x multiple. So I got to thinking about it, and there are a lot of businesses that are under the radar, and people don't realize them, and they're high-tech businesses in this city and state that they are paying dividends and have been doing so for 10, 15 years. And returns for their investors. So there's a couple different business models, and not every business has to be sold because, you think about it, go back to a lot of those companies 3 or 4 years after the sale and let me know what type of culture is still remaining there. So are the offices even still open in our city?
Well, it's not only that, we've got a state that turns out more technology engineers than any other state in the nation. When you're competing on the East and the West Coast, the dollar is going at least 50% farther here. So you've got a natural cost advantage to go after that business. You got to fly out, but the whole concept that this is a good state to invest in. There's great people here. There's great talent. The cost of living makes it very competitive. And to that point, the companies that have the ideas, that have the value proposition, that have technology that's going to make a difference, like yours, they're getting funded, and it's
very much so. And being in this part of the country, and in particular our state. I mean, think about it. Right now, I have just outside my door young, talented people from Rose-Hulman, from Purdue's computer science area, from IU's computer science area, and from IUPUI. They're all out there, and they wanted to stay in our state. They have families here, and they know that the amount of money that they can make here is probably less than the East and West Coast, but they have a better life as part of that. But I think one of the things we often overlook here is just good old Hoosier work ethic. The fact that people here want to do the job and they want to do it right, and they're not used to taking shortcuts to make that happen. And you find people wanting to take shortcuts a lot of times in other places, and so that work ethic combined with the cost of living and the fact that that they are just talented people that want to stay in this area, it all combines for a very, very good environment.
It's the unknown secret that's starting to get out. I mean, with Exact Target, Angie's List, those things. I mean, there's a great infusion of capital. Jay, I know we got you for a limited time, but I want you to just speak to our younger executives, our younger startups. I want you to talk to them just give them the mindset that they've got to have. What's the one thing you would tell them? Knowing how many times you've done this and how successful you've been, you've had the ups and the downs. You've had those days where you're like you want to kill half the team, and you had those days where you saw the other side of it, right? What's the one thing you would tell them to as they're trying to shape that idea and they're thinking about taking the risk and the leap? What would you say to somebody about to step into that game?
Build the team around you. Figure out what your weaknesses are, and build a team with people that your weaknesses are their strengths, and that have some proven track record to do that. And also, don't forget, if you're going to go in and you're going to build something that's going to revolutionize, let's say, the parking industry, hire some people from that industry. Have some industry knowledge. Don't go into it. I remember a very highly touted, well-funded company out in Silicon Valley in my sector that got like 20 or 30 million in venture funding. And I was out there, and they had literally 100 people working in this warehouse trying to build these applications on. And I asked that person, I said, how many of those 100 people have ever worked in the nonprofit sector or served on a nonprofit board? And he thought for a moment, and he rubbed his chin. He said, I don't think we have any.
Wow.
And I go, I really wonder if you're going to make it.
Yep.
And 9 months later, they shut their doors and gave back half of their funding.
Wow.
Because they didn't understand the market. So, the key thing, more so than the business plan and everything else, build the team and find some folks that have a successful track record, because that's what the investors want. If someone came to me and said, Jay, we want you to be an angel investor, the first thing I try to find out is get to know the members of the team and what their past experiences are.
Right. So right here in Fort Benjamin, Indiana, Indianapolis, Indiana, Bloomerang, helping nonprofits by building an ecosystem that drives donorship, it drives revenue, drives donor management. Thanks so much for being on the show, Jay.
You're welcome, Tony. Let's do it again sometime.
For sure.